This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
As wild as it may seem, we are now almost a quarter of the way through the 2024 NFL season. And yeah, that feels very sudden and all that, but it means we're probably starting to get a good grasp on which teams are legitimate and which teams are maybe not so legitimate as far as winning Super Bowl 59. And today, what I want to do is dig into my current NFL power rankings and identify some teams that could potentially be undervalued in the futures market based on what we've seen thus far. I like one Super Bowl 59 future, one bet I like there, and there is a team that I like to potentially make a playoff run. Also, taking a look ahead at the NFL Week 5 betting odds at FanDuel Sportsbook and laying out two spreads and two totals that I like for this week. Welcome on into Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is JimSannes. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research, here to take a look at my updated power rankings and identify some betting value in the futures market at FanDuel Sportsbook and take a look ahead to week number 5 bets as well. We'll dive into all that here in just 1 second, but first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the Covering the Spread podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. We're here Monday through Friday talking best bets in the NFL and across college football as well. College football show coming up tomorrow with Riley Thomas will be live on the FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page at 4 p.m. Eastern to break down that NFL Best Bets Thursday, NFL Player Props on Friday as well. To get those shows again as they're posted, search for Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. And to stream these shows live, check out the new FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page, which is where you can find all the Covering the Spread and Heat Check podcasts live coming your way each and every weekday, Monday through Friday, 6 times per week, breaking down best bets and DFS plays for both college football and the NFL. If you're watching YouTube right now, either live or after the fact, A, thank you, and B, hit that thumbs up and subscribe button and get notifications as we go live each and every weekday. Hey, NFL fans, you can make every moment more this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Never waste a hunch with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states or 18 plus and present in DC. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expires 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. I want to start things off here by taking a look at the Super Bowl 59 futures odds over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Chiefs do still lead the way at 5-1, despite the fact unsure what Rashee Rice's outlook looks like right now, followed by the Niners at plus 650. Then the Sunday Night Football participants on it this week. Ravens 8-1, Buffalo Bills 10-1. And we're pretty deep into the year right now, which again means we've probably a pretty good idea of which teams are contenders, which teams are pretenders. One team that has not looked great so far, because they're 2-2, is the San Francisco 49ers. But I actually think that the Niners are a good value to win the Super Bowl right now at plus 650 at FanDuel Sportsbook. If I compare the current betting odds to my power rankings, the Niners actually do stand out despite the fact they are plus 650. This is a blended power ranking, which does still include a prior. And I think we should do that still because I have back tested phasing the prior out of my model earlier in the season, and it made the back testing my model perform much worse. So having a prior in there is still good because 4 weeks of data is not a big enough sample to fully lean on just what we've seen in 2024. And like that will boost up the Niners because they were a preseason favorite to win it all. But they're good even without the prior in there. If I look at just 2024 data with 0 snaps out of Christian McCaffrey, the Niners are actually still first in my power rankings. Now that may seem wild because again, they're 2-2. They lost to the Vikings, lost to the Rams, but they're third on offense and they're 6th on defense. that is enough to make them the best overall team in my 2024 only power rankings. And honestly, you watch them and I kind of understand why that's the case, because Brock Purdy's kind of doing some stuff with his legs, scrambling a bit. He's been running a bit more, been creating more than what his perception is. They're healthy again, minus Christian McCaffrey, because both George Kittle and Deebo Samuel look pretty good in week number 4. And they actually lead the league in schedule adjusted early down passing efficiency, according to my numbers, while ranking second in late down success rate. Now, they are still second in the NFC West because the Seahawks are 3-1 after their loss last night, but they have 2 games left against each other, and I'd favor the Niners in both of those games, including the one up in Seattle. I just think they're still a really good team who could get better as the year goes along if they can get McCaffrey back and if we can have Kittle and Deebo healthy for that entire time. The Chiefs a bit weakened right now with the uncertainty around Rashee Rice. So I think that now is actually a pretty good time to buy into San Francisco. Plus 650 to win Super Bowl 59 right now. I view that as being a pretty good value. So I want to bet the Niners plus 650 right now. My favorite Super Bowl 59 bet at FanDuel Sportsbook. There is a team that I think is a bit undervalued, and we'll talk about them in a second. First, I want to go through a couple more power rankings that I think might be noteworthy to some of you listening. I've got Buffalo second, followed by Baltimore, and that may sound weird with how Sunday night went, but I also think the Ravens are just kind of a bad matchup for the Bills. If you're a team that can bully a team, that's where the Bills defense will get in some trouble. So from a matchup perspective, the Ravens should have been favored. I was wrong on that. Definitely flubbed that one up. If they meet again, I will keep that in mind for sure, because the Ravens stylistically probably a bad matchup for the Bills. But from an overall strength perspective, I do the Bills as the better overall team right now. And that's where we're sitting at with the AFC side of things with the Bills and the Ravens. Couple other teams that I think are noteworthy. Keeping tabs in Cincinnati. They are 1-3 right now. Pretty tough path to the playoffs, given how well Pittsburgh has played, given they've got to go through Baltimore as well. Keeping tabs on them, though, because Joe Burrow has looked better the past couple of weeks. I think that's pretty intriguing. The other one I want to mention, though, is the Green Bay Packers. And if I, again, include that prior in there, and look at both what I thought about this team before the season and factor in what they've done so far this year, the Packers are actually still a top 10 team in my power rankings. And again, might feel odd. They're 2-2, and they looked terrible against Minnesota in the first half last week and had to have that rally. And honestly, that game wasn't as close as the final score indicates. So they didn't look good there. But they have Jordan Love again. And hasn't played his best football yet this year, but we saw his upside in what he did last year. And I think that upside is still there based on the way Jaden Reed is playing, based on a lot of things going for this offense. NFC is kind of wonky, where the NFC North has 3 very good teams in the Lions, Vikings, and Packers. NFC West has 2 with the Seahawks and the Niners. NFC South has a big old question mark. I frankly can't figure out the Bucks, the Falcons, and the Saints. I'm actually more confused about them now than I was entering the year. But I think the key thing here is the NFC East seems kind of weak. Cowboys and Eagles both falling short of expectations. Love the Commanders, but their defense is still pretty rough. So I think that there is a door open for maybe a third NFC North team to sneak their way in. I wouldn't be shocked if the Packers wind up being that team. They have not looked great yet this year, so it is a bet on progression from what we've seen thus far. But I do think that with their personnel, they've got the ability to do that. I'm intrigued enough by them to consider them plus 118 to make the playoffs this year. Again, still pretty high in my overall power rankings when you weigh in that prior from coming into this year. And I think that that's enough based on the quarterback, based on the skill core. I think there is enough to consider the Packers. So based on current power rankings for me, 2 bets I do like at FanDuel Sportsbook right now are the Niners win it all plus 650 and the Packers to make the playoffs. They are currently plus 118 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Let's take a look now at the opening odds for week number 5 in the NFL. Want to go through and identify 4 separate bets that do stand out to me based on where things stand right now. The first bet that I like is probably not a surprise based on the opening discussion. I think the Niners are undervalued to beat the Cardinals. They're minus 7.5 and minus 105 at FanDuel Sportsbook. And I think that's a bit light based on what we've seen out of the Niners, but also, frankly, out of the Cardinals so far. The Cardinals defense is really, really bad, and they're bad against the rush, bad against the pass, which means if the Niners do build a lead, I think they'll be able to run the ball and still build upon that lead late. The Cardinals offense has good numbers because they played really well against a solid Bills defense back in week 1, but they also looked bad against the Commanders, who are a very bad defense. Didn't do enough against the Lions, I didn't think. That game was at home, and now they go on the road to face the 49ers. The defense has not been amazing for the Niners, and 7.5 is kind of a wonky number, but the defense has been much better than Arizona's has. And I think that if you look at this team, they should be favored by, I think, frankly, close to double digits, more so than 7.5. Now, 7.5 is kind of a weird number because we lose if the Niners win like a 27-20 game or something like that. And they would be a good teaser team at 7.5 because it gets you a 6-point teaser, it gets you a win at both 7 and 3. So you want to tease through both those numbers. I don't see another team I want to pair them with, though, because you need 2 to tango for a 2-team 6-point teaser. You could look at some of the underdogs this week. The Raiders, 2.5-point dogs, Jets 2.5, Colts 2.5. You could consider teams like that, but that's kind of scary for me personally. So I'd rather ride with just the Niners by themselves. They are fully healthy right now. I think they're undervalued by the market overall. So sign me up with the Cardinals, the 49ers, I should say, minus 7.5, taking on Arizona for this week. The second bet I like is a team that burned us last week, and that is the Buffalo Bills. This time they're on the road taking on the Houston Texans. Texans 3-1 so far, but I'm going right back to the well with the Buffalo Bills this week, taking the Bills money line at plus 102 at FanDuel Sportsbook. I mentioned before that I think the Ravens are just a terrible matchup for the Bills, where they're this big team and the Bills defense is undersized. They want to play nickel. They want to get that small personnel out there, and the Ravens took advantage of that, to their credit. The Texans are not that team. Joe Mixon's a good running back and should be back this week. But if you look back to week 1, when Mixon had that huge game, they had Brevin Jordan in that game, and Jordan has since torn his ACL. Dalton Schultz is not a blocking tight end. So I think you look at the personnel for the Texans, they're not as well equipped to exploit the Bills' key weaknesses. But I do think the Bills can exploit the Texans' key weaknesses, which are their linebackers. The linebackers for the Texans are, I think, pretty bad, which is why Christian Kirk had a good game in week number 4 for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And you look at this Bills team, they run their offense through James Cook. They run their offense through their tight ends and Khalil Shakir. All those players make their hay in the middle of the field. So stylistically, the Bills are an awful matchup for the Texans. Texans also have looked kind of uneven so far. They've not really dazzled me despite having a good record so far. So frankly, I think the Bills should be favored in this game. I've got them favored by 2.5 personally. We're getting plus money on the money line here at plus 102. I don't think we should be getting that. So going back to the Bills, I know it did not work out well last week, but they're still a very good team that blew out their previous 2 opponents. And the Jags kept it close against the Texans. I think the Bills can assert their dominance and get back in the win column here. So taking the Bills money line plus 102 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Couple of totals that I like, both somewhat influenced by wind, both of them being unders. The first one is in Jacksonville with the Colts taking on the Jaguars. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, total for this game is 46.5, with the under sitting at minus 115. And I think that number is a bit too high, personally, for a couple reasons. Now, betting unders for Colts games will drive you nuts because they are a very fast team, which makes them more fun to watch, but it can lead to overs in chaotic fashion, even if the offenses are not super efficient. I don't think either offense is good here, though. The Jags, 23rd, based on number fire schedule adjusted metrics so far this year. The Colts rank 12th, but they're 19th through the air. Both defenses are pretty rough, and I think that will stick, but it's just a kind of a high total where you're hanging your hat primarily on defense and pace. This game is in Jacksonville, so it's not indoors. And we got 10-mile-per-hour winds projected right now in Jacksonville for this game. So you've got mediocre offenses, mediocre to below average. You've got bad defenses, sure, and good pace, but also you've got some wind here. I feel like this number is just too high. Maybe betting against the Colts pace does wind up burning me. I think the other factors all point toward an under here. So I want to take the Jags and Colts under 46.5 minus 115 at FanDuel Sportsbook. The other total that I like is also in part based on wind, and not surprising that it's up in Chicago, as the Bears are taking on the resurgent Carolina Panthers. Total for this game is 42.5. Under is also minus 115 in this one, but once again, I do want to go that way. Also some wind to play here, 12 miles per hour right now, and that does play a pretty big role for me. But also, I just kind of think this Bears defense is good. They rank 5th by number fires metrics. Now, Carolina's 28th, but can the Bears exploit that, frankly? I know that DeAndre Swift had some big runs on Sunday, but his success rate was still pretty low, and the Bears rank 27th in overall offense right now. I do have a pretty high passing efficiency expectation in for Andy Dalton, so I'm expecting what he's done so far to largely maintain. But even with that respect for Dalton inside my numbers, I am still seeing value in the under here. I think this Bears defense will put up a pretty good fight. There's a lot of wind here. The Bears defense is underwhelming. All 4 Bears games so far have gone under 42.5 total points. That's despite 2 of those games being indoors and despite facing some pretty rough defenses in the Colts and the Rams in that time as well. So I think, again, combine the wind with the offenses here and the Bears defense, I think we have wiggle room to go towards the under 42.5 at -115 as the Bears take on the Panthers. So to reiterate, those week 5 bets I like at FanDuel Sportsbook right now. I like the Bears and Panthers under 42.5 at -115. The Jags and Colts under 46.5 -115. Like the Bills money line taking on the Texans at +102, and the 49ers -7.5 -105 as they take on the Arizona Cardinals for this week. That is all that we have for today here on Covering the Spread. As mentioned, though, back with you once again tomorrow. We'll be talking some college football. Riley Thomas of FanDuel Research breaking down his best bets across week number 6 in college football. To get that show as it goes live, search for the Covering the Spread podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts and stream it live. Check out the FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page, again, live Monday through Friday, 6 times per week total across Covering the Spread and the Heat Check if you want these shows as they go live to get the most up-to-date odds. Again, FanDuel Football Betting on YouTube, or just go to my Twitter account at JimSannes. You can find a link to it there. You can also find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. I want to give a big thank you to our YouTube producer, Justin Lane, for his work on the video side of things. Thank you, Justin. And thank you all for tuning in. This has been Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast.